Well, hi everybody. Welcome to Stratosphere Lounge. I'm your host, Bill Whittle, and I may pass out at any time here. Everything seems to be working correctly, so that's alarming. I hope everybody had a great New Year's. We had a terrific New Year and had a Russian New Year, which is really kind of fun. Yeah, it's mentioned a few times before. It's New Year's for Russia, since the communists took away Christmas, is a combination of New Year's and Christmas and 4th of July and a bunch of other things. So Natasha and I went out to a restaurant and we had ourselves a fine old time. And took one of the best pictures of us ever taken, which I guess I'm going to have to send in next time, unless I happen to have it on me. I don't think that's likely. But in any event, it was a great day and a great night, and here we are in 2018. Raise your hand if you didn't think we'd get this far. I remember clearly growing up in the 70s and 80s, mostly in the 70s, that I did not think we or anyone else was going to make it, to the 21st century, let alone, practically, well, we are 18% of the way through. Or is it 19% or 17%? Because zero doesn't count. It's either 17, 18, or 19% of the way through 2000s. And we're still in one piece. We're still afloat. So that's good news. We'll take what we can get. Just a couple little updates on what's been going on the other side of the tracks here. Been doing a lot of work last couple of days on something. I am going ahead on this game thing. The more I talk about it, the more I think about it, the more realistic. The more important, rather, I think it is. When we put this demo together, we are going to start by the sales demo for this game idea. Excuse me one second. And we are going to start with something that I'd love to tell you it shocked me. It didn't shock me so much. It shocked Natasha. It shocked my friend Fritz. Shocked a bunch of people. And so we're going to start this thing off with just a montage of people basically just being murdered on the street. The worst offender for this is Grand Theft Auto, but it's by no means the only offender. So I am going there somewhere with this. Just you'd think I would have had time to get this shot in place, but since I didn't, we're going to see if I can get this audio going. You get the idea. Hey, there you go. So here's the deal. So we start off with this montage of Grand Theft Auto. Now, I have never played really Grand Theft Auto. But Grand Theft Auto is a computer game where basically it's what we consider a sandbox game, and that means that the computer is not guiding you through a story. And some of these first-person shooters like Medal of Honor or something like that, or Battlefield series, you jump into the game, there's a animated sequence called a cutscene. It sets you up onto the first kind of level. You kind of walk through the level. In some games, like I said, on Battlefield or Call of Duty or things, they're actually very limited in terms of where you can go. Kind of walk through the adventure and you get through what you're doing. And then there's another animated cutscene takes you to the next adventure and off you go. But I'm not too much interested in that. I'm interested in sandbox games. And sandbox games are where the computer is basically refereeing the laws of physics, essentially. It's probably the best way to think of it. It's just basically enforcing the laws of physics. What happens if you fire a weapon in this direction? It hits something. How much damage does it do? It does gravity and walking and all the rest of it. Now, one of these games is called Grand Theft Auto, and as Bone Canoe points out, there is a story. I don't know if he's talking about Grand Theft Auto. In any event, I should have had this loaded, but in any event. There's multiple, and I mean when I say multiple, I mean hundreds of collections of people just getting gunned down in the street. And since Grand Theft Auto 5 takes place in Southern California, They're getting gunned down in the streets in Venice Beach and at Santa Monica. And you will see at the beginning of these videos, because I'm trying to make the case, right? I'm trying to say, look, we got a real problem as a society. And the problem is there's a bunch of young people out there who don't have any real friends, never really formed close personal relationships. The only friends they really have are in the games. It's not the same thing, and we all know it. And then this is what they're doing. And this isn't for points. It isn't to achieve anything. It's just walking down the street and just murdering people to watch them fall down. Basically, guys just clubbing women on the beach with baseball bats and so on. I didn't put this together. There's a lot of those out there. And one of them, I want to just basically do a freeze frame and say that window right there belongs to Casa Del Mar Restaurant, and I've had dinner in that place. So this is what's going on out there. A lot of these people are perfectly grounded and perfectly sane and perfectly fine. A lot of them aren't. And in any event, whether you like it or not, this is where things are going. I think the computer game budget back in even 2014 was 3 times what it is for films. And Steven Spielberg's new movie, Ready Player One, basically talks about a world where everybody essentially lives in a double-wide trailer. What difference does it make? Why would you possibly want to spend the money? Or, in fact, the economy's crashing, so how could you get the money to live in a nice house? What's the point of it? And this is the thing that also interests me very much. Because if you look at Grand Theft Auto 5, it is getting very close, especially the backgrounds. Not the people quite so much yet, but the backgrounds. It's getting to the point where in real time you can barely tell it apart from the real world. So, I mean, is this the future for our country? You could certainly make the case that it is. And I'm going to make the case that it is if we don't do something about it. Where you have, and it's not just millennials, it's post-millennials. And in fact, the average computer gamer is considerably older than that. I think known miscreant Matt Lloyd said they were 38 or something is the average age gamer. But in any event, it's not too hard to imagine a world where as these games become more and more attractive, more and more realistic, more and more immersive, and especially given how so many of these kids are raised where, no adversity, no hardship. And if, in a game, if you have adversity or hardship, you just respawn, reboot it, and try again. It's not hard to imagine a world where instead of young people going out and starting businesses and saving money and buying houses or starting businesses, they basically work in essentially very low-paying jobs and live in a one-bedroom studio apartment, because as they start to show at the beginning of the trailer for Ready Player One, if all of your time is going to be in the virtual world, what difference does it make? What difference does it make? All you need to do is make enough money to be able to pay the electricity, and then dive into this universe where you're a hero, and magnificent things happen, and everybody goes there because it's got a lot of the excitement and glamour of the world, but none of the risk. And this is repulsive to me, and I'm sure it's repulsive to people like you as well, but it's not repulsive to them. And this is what they've grown up on. So basically, I'm going to say, look, there's just wanton acts of murder being committed all the time out there. And as more and more Americans, young Americans, get into computer games, more and more of them are at risk for any number of things. However, there are some big advantages, and some of these advantages are profound. Virtually everybody in every game that I've seen is not only armed, but arming themselves is, one of the very, very biggest things you can do. Extra weapons, more weapons. Most of these characters carrying 6 or 7 weapons. They can switch from rocket launchers to sniper rifles to M4 carbines and all the rest. So everybody in the game, in these games, especially for the young men, obviously, are armed, heavily armed, as opposed to what they profess to believe here in the real world. There are also many cases, especially in these sandbox games, known miscreants Matt Lloyd and our friend Vipercheck have gone out and made millions of dollars while I've been sitting here working hard in the virtual world, and it's a little addicting. To I'll get to my point, Cheryl. Okay, this is a walk around the park. I'm not on a timetable, and I don't have to be anywhere anytime for anybody other than myself. So you've got these young people who are making money, and they're heavily armed. And these are real advantages for us. So in any event, the thing I've been working on for the last week, I'd been thinking prior to this that I would have to basically composite live action into the games. And it looked a little iffy and a little dicey. And then this week I just got over it. I just finally got over it and said, no, I'm going to have to do computer-generated characters. So I spent about 2 days playing around with something, and this is not final by any means because this is the result of 2 days' work, but and it's way overdone. I didn't realize just how wrinkled and so on it is. But basically, the character in the game is going to be a fighter pilot named John Boyd, and he's had some bad experiences. He's rather a bitter guy. And so my message, my face, when I'm talking to people in the future in the game world, I may be using this face right here. Again, this is an early version. It's a little severe. But using relatively inexpensive motion capture and facial capture, this stuff is coming way down now. It's $20,000, $30,000. It's not a huge amount of money. This is maybe the face of the message. I mean, this may be the face of one of the many faces of conservative values in this world. And I like this face. I went too far with it. It's a little too wrinkled, but I wanted the guy to look like a bird of prey. In this story arc that I'm trying to set up, I'm going to tell the story of the real John Boyd, who basically, in this particular case in our story, is a guy who's basically been shunted off into the, hinterlands because he's so well aware of the defects that are going on in his own Navy and his own Air Force that he criticizes the Navy and the brass, and they basically shunt him out, and they're trying to get him cashiered. And it's a guy who was at one time a very tough, good-looking guy, and now he looks like a guy who's haunted, and you can still see some aspects of the kindness in him, but there's a lot of real anger and frustration there. And for a day's worth of work, really, I'm very pleased with this. Now, what we'll be able to do is have this guy speaking whatever we want to say. I'm hoping I can find. There are any number of these things available online in the App Store, but I'm hoping I can find some relatively professional grade voice changing software, because I'd like to basically act him out myself. That's nice, Eric. It's a very interesting comment, like a cross between Mr. Spock and Clint Eastwood. I like that very much. I'll soften him up a little bit, but you get the idea. Anyway. That is the face of a computer game character. It's not the face of Bill Whittle, known fascist, homophobe, Nazi, racist, misogynist. There got to be some other things. It's a game character, and when he talks about things like flying, what he's really doing is he's also giving lessons on. Not just giving lessons on flying, not just giving lessons on combat and the history of warfare and the history of our country. Not just that. Basically, I'm going to bring him back again, because I want you guys to see where I'm trying to go with this. Very few people really understand it. But basically, my ultimate goal is to have this person or somebody like this person be a father figure for all of these fatherless boys that are playing these games. And it's somebody who, in the series of these little 3 or 4 minute little vignettes, is going to be a tough guy, real badass, but he does the right thing. and he has younger pilots, new pilots, who are not doing the right thing, and I mean morally. And he basically is going to be their father, and he's going to treat them like that. He's not going to be. We're not going to make movies about him pulling people off to the side in the course of a situation, a walk back from a combat, whatever. He's going to have one thing to say, maybe two things to say, and that's all. So we do, a minute or two of space combat, intercut, sound effects, all this other stuff, and some guy, loses his cool or something, and as they're walking out of the hangar, like you see here, the guy basically makes a comment or two about discipline and about controlling your emotions, and I just think this is going to be the best thing since Rio Bravo. So in any event, I am very, very surprised at how well this rendered. And when I was working on him, I didn't have anything like that kind of detail. I just need to soften him a little. But he's getting pretty close. And we're going to do this for all of our characters. Suspected serial pervert Matt Lloyd has a character, well-known, denizen of dark places. Viper Check also has a character. I'm going to work on them next, and they're going to talk. And my goal is, I'll keep doing what I'm doing, have no fear. But my goal is to maybe take this room off to the right, which I don't use much anymore with the exception of the table, and turn it into a little motion capture studio and put out one of these a week or two, and grow an audience. In any event, that's basically what I've spent my time doing. I'm very, very, very fond of that image. I was shocked that it could be that good. Now, in the game, they'll be able to talk over the game, but the game animate one more time, just because I love it so much. The game in-game animation is not going to look this good for a while. And when I say for a while, I mean probably a year or two. In 2 or 3 years, 5 at the top end, but probably more like 2 years, people will be able to play this game with characters that look like this realistically, and talk to each other. And then in 5 years, you won't be able to tell you're talking to a computerized character. It'll look like a real person in a real set. So in any event, that is it. And actually, J.C. Pershing says if he gives a 3-second smile in a 4-minute segment, that will be the softening. We're talking about softening him up a little bit. That's exactly right, J.C. If this guy is hard to please and demanding and requiring your best, like good fathers should, then having him smile or pat you on the back, it's a big deal. And this is where I am right now. More and more people are going into the virtual world. Somebody else, I've contributed to it perhaps more than I probably want to admit to, but certainly not the lion's share, of $165 million has gone into the creation of this universe. $165 million. Which means that I have access to $165 million worth of effects, background sets, locations, all of it, where more and more Americans are spending more and more time. And I am, by God, going to be in that space or not. We're going to be in that space or we're not. But nobody is doing this. No one's even talking about doing this. And if it works in Star Citizen, it'll work in other games as well. And just to give all the rest of the pitch away while I'm fired up on this subject, the question is, will this work? I'm going to go to it for a 4th time because I like it so much. So the question is, if you have a series of movies and a series of games and so on, and you've got an ongoing storyline about honorable people doing the right thing. Now, this guy doesn't look like a pushover. He doesn't look like George Will to me. So if this guy is an honorable guy and he does the right thing, will it matter? Will it matter in the game? And if people can do it consistently in the game, will they bring it into the real world? Well, I'll tell you what my model is for all of this. And it's very simple. My model is, yeah, thank you, Eric. I'm thinking I'm going to change him like very, very little, if at all. I'm starting to really, he's really growing on me. He's got a haunted look about him. Like I said, I wanted him to look like a bird of prey. I wanted him to look, well, he's the squadron commander for the Eagles. So he's got that real bird of prey look. But my model, my real world model for this entire theory is very simple, and it's the guardian angels. For those of you who either don't know who they are or who do know who they are, maybe just want a little refresher course, before they decided to put a Republican in office in New York City was the murder capital of the world, and it was a pit. And if you've been to Times Square recently, and only recently, you have no idea how vile Times Square used to be. You can walk through Times Square now at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning without a moment's fear. There's so much lights. There's so much going on. It's wonderful. It used to be a pit. And New York City was a pit. And the subways were very, very dangerous. Another excellent point by Dave Big Booty. Dave, you've nailed it. I just this second realized that Dave Big Booty said he looks like a young John Brown. He does. If you look at John Brown, the guy who basically tried to take over Harper's Ferry and start the Civil War, he has a very, very similar look to this. Very similar look to this. All right, thank you for mentioning it. Because the young John Brown has a strange light in his eyes. In any event, guardian angels. So here we go. You've got all of this crime, and people in New York City would basically take 20 or 40 bucks with them, keep them in their front pocket, so that when they got mugged, not if they got mugged, when they got mugged, they'd give this guy the money on. So people were getting mugged everywhere, but they were especially getting mugged in the subways all the time, and they had people were terrified, but you had to go. You had to go to work. You had to come home from work. The subways were a terrifying place to be because they were filled with young thugs, young males who were violent and prepared to fight. And there you go. And one of these former gang members named Curtis Sliwa realized that what these young men needed, not wanted, they didn't know what they want, and they didn't know what they needed either. But he did, because he was one of them. And Curtis Sliwa realized that these young thugs who were terrorizing people, what they really were missing was they were missing a purpose. They were missing a purpose in their lives. They were criminals because what difference did it make? What, is that going to affect their entrance into Harvard? No. They had nothing other than each other and the brotherhood of the gang, but they had no purpose in life, and so they were basically nihilists who just beat up old ladies and took their money and didn't care what happened to them. Didn't care what happened to the old ladies, didn't care what happened to themselves, didn't matter, nothing mattered. It was just horrible. And Curtis Sliwa comes along and basically says to these people, there is a purpose, and here's the purpose. Instead of preying on these weak people and these old people and these innocent people, instead of being a predator to them, you're going to protect them. And you're going to make sure that other people don't harm those people. That will be your purpose. And I'm sure on some level, many people said, many of the people he talked about this, well, what do we get for this? In exchange for what? You want us down there not robbing people? We just make money robbing people. You want us down there not robbing people, stopping other people from robbing people? Are you going to pay us? No, of course we're not going to pay you. We don't have any money to pay you. Well, what do we get? And the answer is, you get a red beret. And that's all it took. All it took. Because then, these young men who had been predators had been given a responsibility and a higher calling and a red beret. And they knew what was expected of them. And so they stood there by the trains and at the entrances and so on. And if anybody came in there and started to mess around, looked like they were going to take some little old lady's purse, they would just get in the way. And if they stayed at it, they'd fight because they were used to fighting. And overnight, he just flipped it. He flipped it. It's the most miraculous thing I personally have ever witnessed in my lifetime. He flipped them. And that tells me that they're not only easy to flip, they want to be flipped. They want it. They want purpose, and they want meaning, and they want role models, and they want father figures. They want someone to show them what to do. And this is not the face that's going to do that. This is the face that looks like it can, tie his shoes half the time. But this face, in a game world, is a severe face. And if you get approval from this face, that's a big deal. And I am telling you, it's going to work. I am hoping I can convince other people that it's going to work, but I know it's going to work. So that's the plan. And I really enjoyed making this 3D character, and I'm going to do more of it. We're going to do some high-level, I hope we're going to do some high-level motion capture and basically produce video game characters that are way above the level of what the game is actually generating right now. And that ought to get a lot of attention too. So that, my friends, is what I have been up to for the last couple of weeks. And so the initial half hour of conversation and general malarkey has come to an end, and we can get on with our questions again for a relatively short show tonight. Eric says does anybody remember the shout out to the Guardian Angels in Batman Begins? I do not remember that. But I would like to meet him very much. And I get the feeling that if I explained this to him, he would not only understand it, he would wonder why it was taking so long for somebody to get this. Oh, there, somebody put it up there now. John Brown. Dave Olson got it on the website on the, here you go. I'll put it up there right now. Hang on a second. Thank you, Dave. Hang on a second. Nice and easy. Here it comes. This is, just as I was moving on, checking the questions, this is John Brown, who, before he got his beard and launched the attack on Fort Sumter, which many people say basically started the Civil War. In Shelby Foote's trilogy, they called him the Meteor. This is, I'll do it in this order. This is my character. I was not thinking about him at all. Here's the character I just created today on the computer. Wow. And here's John Brown from, I want to say, about 1850. Pretty amazing. That's actually really quite remarkable. And thank you for catching it, Dave, because that really is... That is actually quite shocking. I have to tell you, that is quite shocking. In any event, those guys are faces that you look like you could, believe in. Thank you. I said Fort Sumter. Thank you, Dave Big Booty. It was Harper's Ferry. He tried to take over the arsenal at Harper's Ferry and launch a slave revolt, and he had some people with him, and they surrounded him, and the officer who basically led the attack on John Brown's all holed up in Harper's Ferry. This is several years before the Civil War. And he's got some slaves in there, and he's got the arms, and he's surrounded. And the officer in charge of getting John Brown out of Harper's Ferry was a captain, I think, young captain by the name of Robert E. Lee. And John Brown was hanged, and things went downhill from there, as they often do when you're hanged. Anyway, thank you for that, Dave. That's really cool. I was really quite shocked by that. All right, so let's see what we got for today.